Hi everyone, this is Seb from the King of Knights TCG channel, and today I'm going to go over the deck that I took to Bushy Road Summerfest this past weekend here in Manchester, which was my favourite deck in standard format for Vanguard, which is Youthberk. I took this deck because it got support in DZBT09, Knights of Rebirth, and it's so good. Youthberk is, as I said, one of my favourite decks in Vanguard, so of course I wanted to take something that I knew I would enjoy for like 7-8 rounds of Swiss. And I think the list that I've made is near perfect, to be honest. I think it's one of the best Youthberk lists that you will see pre-DZBT09, which is something I will emphasize for this event, is that this event took place on the 30th of August, and that meant DZBT09 was not legal, so I didn't have access to things like Dissection Angel, Minerva wasn't out, Heart of Luru wasn't out, and that sort of put my deck in a sort of a better position than it probably could have been if DZBT09 was legal. But also, to emphasise, the ban list was legal, so Veilord was still one, Rezial lost Surgown, that ban list was legal for English, so that also allowed Youthberk to sort of creep up as one of, I think, the better decks to take, and especially for playing a Keta deck, this is, I think, the best Keta deck to take. Post-ban list, before DZBT09, it's better than Rezial, it's better than, I think, Luard, all the other good Keta decks, it's better than all of those, so we'll get straight into the deck profile, but if you want to see the list, I'll try and edit it into a picture of it into the screen later on. But this isn't just a deck profile, this is like, I'm going to call it a whole comprehensive guide. I'm going to be going over everything you need to know for Youthberk. I'm going to go over my list and why I picked the cards I picked, but also I'm going to show you other cards you can play if you want to play slightly differently, or you want to play more to your play style, then you'll have options to work with. So we'll start off, of course, with the ride line for Youthberk. So the starter I played is Full Bow. You can play any D-Series starter, I chose Full Bow just because I have the SP. Shout out to my friend Larrett for hooking me up with this. And then the grade 1 was the Squire of Spear Streaks Youth. So this says, when ridden upon by the grade 2 Sorrowful Ardent Light Youth, you Soul Blast 1, check top 5, and you may add a Youthberk to your hand, or reveal a grade 2 or lower card from among it and call it to rearguard. So it builds your board, helps compress your deck, helps you find your Persona rides or Revol forms, so very strong card, no reason not to play it. And then the grade 2 we play is the Sorrowful Ardent Light Youth, which I just mentioned. So this is just a power crept version of the Knight of Ardent Light Youth that we used to have in the original starter deck. He says, when rode upon by a unit with the Revoldress ability, which is his deck's gimmick, which I'll get into in a minute, you can Energy Blast free to add a grade 2 or greater unit back to your hand. So this does a lot of things. It means that if you make a big board on your second turn, it intercepts from your grade 2s, you can get them back to then reuse again. It makes discarding for the ride deck so much easier, because you have no discard targets, you can just discard like a Persona ride or something and just get it back straight away. So this card does a lot. And then the grade 3 I'm playing is the Youthberk Skyfall Arms Rebuild. So Rebuild has 3 effects, and we'll go over them all now. So he has Revoldress, which is this deck's like gimmick, as I said. So Revoldress is an auto effect, and in the battle that he attacks, you may do one of the following. You may choose a Revol form from your hand and ride it as stand and give it drive -2, or you can Counterblast 1 and choose one from your drop zone and ride it as stand and give it drive -2. So it guarantees 4 attacks, and then depending on what Revol form you pick, you get to do more attacks. So his second effect then is Auto. When rode upon during the battle phase, you may discard a card from your hand and choose one of your Vanguards and give it reset its drives to 1. So it means that you're going to ride the Revol form and then lose 2 drives, so have 0 drive checks, and then it'll drive or reset to 1, meaning it will do 1 drive check at minimum. And then he has the last effect, which is continuous. When you ride this unit back on top of a Revol form, you bind the Revol form. So you're not fueling soul like the old Youthberk used to do, however, by binding it, you're enabling your best Revol form now, which is the Exist, who I'll explain in a minute. But this is the ride line I chose, and the first discussion I want to talk about is why did I choose to play these 3, over the older ones. So those are Determined to Break Away Youth and Knight of Ardent Light Youth, and these two are very simple. The new ones are just better. These are just power crept versions of these two. These both Soul Blast 1 to check top amount of a deck for a Youthberk Autocollar thing, but this checks top 5, this checks top 3 for the same cost for Soul Blast 1. And these two both add you a grade 2 or higher card back from the drop when ridden over by a Revoldress possessing unit. So this costs energy, this costs Counterblast. So I'd rather, very simple, you spend a resource that you get for free by just starting your turn instead of counterblasting, which you don't have any counter charge in this deck other than just like raw healing, so that's something to keep in mind. And then why am I playing Revolve Form, the Youthberk Skyfall Arms rebuild over the original Skyfall Arms? Now, they both have pros and cons, and I think that's something to address, is that rebuild isn't necessarily just better than Skyfall Arms, it depends on your build, so I'm focusing on the exist. So this is better because he binds a Revolve Form, and he himself can reset the drives to 1, whereas this, it has better filtering because the second effect is you check top 3, and you may add a Revolve Form to hand or call a grade to a low by discarding a card from your hand. So it helps you filter for your deck better and helps you build a board better than this one does. However, this by itself can't reset the drives, and it can't Revolve Dress from the drop. So it means you're having to actively play other cards to reset your drives to give the Revolve Form drive checks, and also you can't do it from the drop zone, which means that you're having to hold it. So if you don't have one in your hand, you aren't Revolve Dressing, whereas this one, you can discard them from your hand for your ride deck, and use cards to put them into Soul and Soul Blast them back out immediately for costs, to guarantee you'll have them. So this is just, I think, much more of a, like, say, a sturdier way of playing the deck, and using this card as a way of guaranteeing your Revolve Forms more consistently. So that's it for the ride line. We'll then get on to the main deck, where we'll just first and foremost go over the 3 more copies of Rebuild in the main deck. Very straightforward. Persona riding is very important in this deck. It makes your numbers so much more threatening. The extra 10k different row really does matter, so you should obviously play for your Persona rides. You should always play Persona rides in your deck. And then the next card is the other main grade 3 in the deck, which is the Revolve Form. So we are playing 4 copies of Youthberk Revolve Form Exist. This is the new one that came out in DZBT09. So this is now, I think, the best Revolve Form. This card says, when it's placed by the Revolver's ability, you do all the following. You Energy Blast 3 and choose one of your rear guards and stand it. So it's now doing 5 attacks instead of 4 attacks, which the other Revolve Forms will do. And then if you give your front row 10k, however, if there's a Revolve Form in the bind zone, you give your front row 20k instead. And if a Revolve Form in the bind zone is a copy of himself, he gets a crit. So you're going to be doing, on your first turn, 5 attacks with the last 3 having like a Persona Ride effective level of numbers. And then your turn 4, you'll be giving 20k to the front row and he'll be having a crit. And also don't forget from Rebuild, when he swings, he'll be doing 1 drive check. So that's extra pressure. And then at the end of battle, this unit, at the end of the turn, you may choose a Revolve Dress unit from your soul and ride it as rest. So you're going to be going back into Rebuild, and Exist will then get bound by Rebuild's effect. So that's it for the Revolve Forms. So I'm not playing any additional Revolve Forms, but I will quickly talk about the other Revolve Forms, and if you choose to play them, what they do, and in my opinion, which ones are the best to play. So the best other Revolve Forms, you want to play like a 5th one. I'm not just 2/2 space. There's no space in the deck, I don't think, for it, because you need to play. There's a lot of cards you need to play, and then you'll realize you're sort of running out of space very quickly. But the second best Revolve Form to play, I think, is Tempest. So everyone, if you've played Standard, probably has heard of Tempest. Tempest says when he's placed by Revolve Dress ability, you give your front row 5k, and then you Counterblast 1, reveal top 2 cards of your deck, and you choose one of your opponent's rear guards with the same grade as one of the revealed units, and bot deck it. So that's good because it's spot removal, which this deck normally does not have access to. And then same effect as all the other Revolve Forms is that you rewrite the Revolve Dress unit from the soul. Then the second best one I think you should be playing, if you're playing a 5th one, if you don't want to play Tempest, is actually Zest. Now, some people will think that is kind of silly. Zest was known as the worst Revolve Form for a while. However, he's actually, I think, better than the next one, which is Gust, so we'll talk about them both. So I think Zest is better than Gust because, whilst yes, Gust, for context, Gust when you ride him by Revolve Dress gets a drive by discarding a card in your hand and 10k. Zest, when he's placed by Revolve Dress, gets 15k, and if you're Persona Road, he gets a crit. So he has more pressure innately, and whilst Gust gets to do Twin Drive because of when you ride it over Rebuild, you pitch a card, give it an extra drive. So, but you're going discarding 2 cards from your hand to give him a Twin Drive. Now, if he checks a trigger, his number is bigger than Zest's, but I think Zest just having the crit built in is better. So I think if you're going to play a 5th Revolve Form, you play Tempest. If you don't like the idea of a Counterblast, even though Countercharge in your deck, you can play Zest. And then if you don't want to play either of them for some reason, play Gust. And then we'll talk about the last existing Revolve form that you have to build your entire deck around this one, unfortunately, which is Mr. Full Blast. So Full Blast, when placed by Revolve Dress, you Cat Loss 1 and you perform all the following effects based on which Revolve forms are in the soul, and then if all 3 of them are in the soul, you give the front of 15k, which on your first grade 3 turn is a bigger number than what Exist will give you. However, on your grade 4 on your turn 4, Exist will give 20k to front, which is now bigger than what Full Blast would give you. So that's something to think about. But the effects he gets are you need to play Full Blast and then play at least 1 copy each of these, and then build your deck around cards that get them into the soul throughout your first couple turns of the game. But if Zest's in the soul, he gets a crit. If Gust's in the soul, he gets a drive, and if Tempest's in the soul, he bot decks a guy. So don't get me wrong, he's still a very good card. I think if you were to build around Full Blast though, I think you play the original Skyfall arms though, because it filters better and helps you find the cards that get you your Revolve form into the soul much easier. But I'm personally, as I said, I'm only playing the 4 Exists because I think that's all you need. And then the last grade 3 card we are playing is our Regulus piece in the deck, which is Shroud in Darkness. So Shroud in Darkness came out in the Jeweled Master deck set, and when I figured out what this card did, I read it, and I just thought this card is perfect for what my deck is trying to do. So it says you can play this card if you didn't ride from the ride deck this turn, you can play it without paying the cost, and its cost is Cat Blast 1. So if you didn't, so you Persona Road, you'd have to Cat Blast for it, but you don't mind Cat Blasting for it because it's only Cat Blast 1. And it revives 2 things from Drop Zone, and they have to have different grades and not be Sentinels, and their grades have to equal your Vanguard's grade. So it means that you can revive like a grade 1 and a grade 2, which most of the time you're going to do, or it can revive you, like say you can revive like a grade 2, and then if you've Soul Blasted like your grade 0, you can revive that. But this card helps build a board. And then I did test other Regulus pieces, and I think the only other 2 to talk about really are Twincast, which I was testing at first. I thought this card was great. You know, the shield value was really, really good. However, I think the entire deck needs to like fix the deck's main issue, which is not having a good board. Like, it has poor ability to build board, so I think your entire deck needs to focus around doing that. So my entire deck focuses on, you know, calling other things or compressing the deck, and this doesn't like contribute to that. However, the shield value is kind of nice. If you don't want to play Shroud in Darkness, feel free to play Twincast. It's getting reprinted soon, so it'll be much more cheap. And then you could also play Union of the Sky. It's effectively an energy cycler, but also a 50k shield and draws you a card. So it's really good. And if you bind a card with the same name as your Vanguard, you bind with Persona Rides, it becomes 25k shield. So it's not terrible. However, I think after my initial test, after like all my testing, I think Shroud in Darkness is definitely the way to go. So that's it for the grade 3s. We'll then get on to the grade 2s, in which we are playing 4 copies of 4 Front Knight Tearfault. Now, Tearfault is, I get it, it's an expensive card, but it's the best grade 2 to play in Kedda. I'm not going to be sorry about it. This is the best grade 2 in Kedda. I bought them when they were extremely cheap when they first came out because no deck was playing them. Like, you know, I thought ahead. I thought this card will eventually get good, so why not buy it? But this card says, when this unit is placed on the rearguard circle, other than by a unit card's ability, so if you say call your ace unit, you can't, and then call this, you can't trigger its effect, and T-Fault can't trigger another T-Fault when you call it. So it has to be placed by a non-unit's ability, so from hand or by an order card's effect. Use Soul Blast 1, check top 5 you've played an order this turn, to choose one unit with a grade lower than your Vanguards and call it to rearguard, or if you reveal a normal order, you can add it to your hand, so it can find you another order card for like gas for the next turn. It can find Shroud in Darkness because it is a normal order. And then its second effect is when this unit attacks a grade 3 or greater unit, so if it attacks grade 2s it doesn't get the effect. It gets 10k power if you have 4 more units, so easiest way is just like your Vanguard and then 2 rear guards, and in the front row and 2 in the back row. But this card is the best grade 2 in the deck. Best grade 2 in Kedda, as I've said. It compresses your deck and it makes the biggest number by itself. And then the second like main grade 2 who makes a bigger number is 2 copies of Louivron. So Louivron says, when this unit is placed on rearguard from the hand or discard for the ride phase, you can Soul Blast 1 and either reveal from your ride deck your Vanguard with Persona Ride, which of course Rebuild does have Persona Ride, or if your Vanguard has Persona Ride, so you're on your grade 3, you can get a Persona ticket So the persona tickets, I'll bring one up now, is these things. These are like standards equivalent to like quick shields, or like the shields you get in premium. So this is just a blitz order. It's a 10k shield, and then if your opponent has a crest other than the energy generator, so it's against stride decks, it gets an additional 5k shield. So it's effectively a free 50k shield against stride decks, it's free 10k shield against regular decks, and then it allows you to play a second blitz order that turn. So you can do, it says you can play 2 of them. You can't play like one more, it says you play 2 of them. So you can play this and then play another one, or you can play this and then play Elementaria. If you play Elementaria first, you then can't play these anymore because you've not, Elementaria doesn't say you can play another blitz order. So it's very important. Also, it has the effect of during your turn you can't discard it for costs, so keep that in mind. You can during your opponent's turn, so you can discard it for a PG. Just keep those things in mind. And then his second effect is that when he attacks a grade 3 or greater unit, he gets plus 5k. He's at minimum 15k, which means that against your opponent's Vanguard, they still have to, you know, actually think about guarding it. So that's it for like the 2 main grade 2s, and then we played 2 grade 2s at 1-offs. And quickly I'll mention, just because I remembered, that originally when I was testing my list, I was actually playing 3 copies of Louivron, like this. I was playing 3 Louivron for default, and it felt absolutely amazing. I think if you're not going to an event, you just do that, play 3 Louivron. However, I cut a copy of Louivron for the next grade 2 I'm going to talk about, which is something I discovered, and I think if the ban list was not legal, I would not have chose to play this, I don't think, but I chose to play 1 copy of Knight of Ludicity Bleothin. Now, some of you will all be thinking, what on earth does this card do? Well, this is a common from DZBT09, so you don't remember it because it was a set with Bastion Accord and it isn't a grade 3. But this card says, when it's placed on rearguard, doesn't care where from, so if it's placed from hand, placed from your decks, you call it by an effect, or revived from the drop, you can counterblast 1, discard a card from your hand, and choose one of your opponent's rearguards, and from the field and the drop, bot deck all copies of it. So this bottom deck Trick Moons, because now Veil odds limit to 1, they're going to have to, Bavs has to actually have Trick Moons on board, so in bottom deck Trick Moons against Virgillo. If they don't find the variance raids, or they've used them all, you can bottom deck Ezawars. Yes, they can search them back out with Elf Knights, but that doesn't change that you've ripped 15 or 30k shield value off their board. It bottom decks Gabrielius and Raphistor against Reziel. Against other decks, against the mirror match, you bottom deck their Interceptors. Against Artazaria, I use this card to bottom deck 4 Shadow Army tokens, so their Luminoels lost, they had 2 Luminoels, 1 on board, 1 in hand, and they collectively lost 40k shield value. This card is really, really strong, and none of my opponents knew what the card did. They all went, wait, it does what? Picked it up, read it, and realised this card is really, really insane. Against an Overlord player in testing, I bottom decked their Burning Horns. Against Vermilion, I bottom decked their Interceptors, and I revived it and bottom decked their Rising Phoenixes. This card is ridiculous. However, I do think in a non-event environment, you just cut this and play a 3rd Louivron just for consistency, and Soul Blasting means you get your Evolved Forms in the drop zone from your soul that you place whilst using other Carinos. And then the last grade 2 we play is our Ace unit. No reason not to, this card is insane. If you're going first, unfortunately though, you can't use your grade 2 add back and use this because they both cost Energy Blast free, and the free energy you gain per turn should always be getting used for exist, so you don't get to use it as much going first, but going second this card you can use it and it goes insane. He says when he's placed on rearguard, other than during the battle phase, he gains 5k. Importantly, he gains the 5k regardless if you do the rest of the effect, so if you just choose to call it and not use his effect, he still gets 5k. And then you Energy Blast free and look at the top 7 cards of your deck, and choose 1 card from among them and call it to rearguard, and it cannot be retired by your opponent's effects, and it cannot be chosen by your opponent's effects. So you call another grade 2 against Papsagra, they can't remove it, so you still have 5k intercept, but it means he will be retired, but the other grade 2 won't, so it means they don't get to draw because they didn't retire nothing, you still retired him, but you still have a rearguard to intercept with if you need to. And he says when he attacks, he gains 5k if your opponent's Vanguard's grade 3, and then if you're 4 more rearguard, he gains another 5k. So when you call him, it'll be a 25k attacker, which asks for 25k shield from your opponent. 25k shield, sorry, it asks for 15k shield from your opponent, but it will ask for 25k on a persona ride turn. So this is another really strong attacker. And the first effect is, if you haven't seen what each units are, this is a unique skill, so you can only use it once, so use it wisely. However, if you're able to revive it, you'll still get the other effect when he swings. So that is it for the grade 2s. I will now go over very quickly other grade 2s you can play and sort of go over their pros and cons that I found from testing. So the big three, I want to call them, other grade 2s you should be considering are Valtros and Liel. There's also Exalted Dragon, and there is the grade 2 Maple. So I tested all of these and they all felt really strong, but they all collectively share the same weakness of they don't gain any power when they swing, which means that if you have two of any of these in the front row and you swing, if you didn't Persona Ride, that number is not hitting your opponent's Vanguard, so you better hope they have a grade 2 in the front row you can swing into instead, because otherwise their attack is not doing anything and it sort of makes your 5 attacks seem a lot less scary. But Valtrosa and Liel is pretty good. On call, you counterblast one if it's placed from the hand. You counterblast one and bot deck something without Sentinel, and you check top 5 and you either add an aura card about Regulus piece in it to your hand and shuffle your deck, or you call something to rearguard. So it helps you build a board, and it does help the deck's weakness of struggling to build a board, which all 3 of these do. And then Exalted Dragon is when he's discarded from your hand during your turn, you can Soul Blast 1 and call it to rearguard. However, it can't attack during that turn. But then if a unit was placed by a card's ability this turn, he gains boost. So Revoldress is a card's ability. Him calling himself is a card's ability. If you call something off an order card, that's a card ability. So this card will pretty much always have boost. And then the Maple, just like everyone knows what Maple does, when you ride a grade 3 during the ride phase, she can revive herself on the drop. There's not another Maple on the board. So those are the first 3 main grade 2s to talk about. These are 3 I tested extensively, and in a non-default order variant of the deck that I will showcase if people are interested, I mainly focus on using these cards on Louivron still. And then the other grade 2s to talk about that I've tested are the other Keta Dual Nation card, which is Saphira. The same thing as the other 3, doesn't gain any power. However, the revive is pretty nice, and recurring order cards is pretty good, but it's just the fact it costs a counterblast is pretty. It makes sure you're counterblasting quite a lot, and as I said, there's no way to countercharge in the deck, so it can be kind of awkward. And then I did actually test this guy who is Durigan, and he, if there's a Wolf from the bind zone continuously during a turn, gets 5k, so he's at minimum 15k, so great. He's a 15k attacker, so your opponent actually has to guard his attack if you attack at the Vanguard. And then when he's stood by your Vanguard's ability, if your Vanguard has Youthberk in its name, you can counterblast 1, draw a card, and then when he attacks again, if your opponent would guard, it's a 2-card guard restrict, so that is quite nice pressure. It can make it quite awkward for your opponent. However, costing a counterblast is pretty awkward, but I think if you don't want to play defaults, this is something to consider. And then if you want extra shield value, you can play Vreed, who just continuously, if your Vanguard has Youth in its name, gains 5k shield, so she's 10k in your hand. It makes guarding certain awkward numbers much easier. And then another card you can play to help you find pieces. The 2 cards you can play to help you find your pieces is Cadwalla, which you've probably seen from Rezael. Soul Blasting as a cost is really good. He Soul Blasts and retires himself at the end of his attack. If you have 4 or more units, he checks top 3, and you can add a grade 2 or higher card from among them to your hand. So it finds you Persona Rides, finds you other grade 2s, finds you Revolve forms, and then if you didn't reveal anything, you draw a card, but first shuffle your deck. And then if you want to just focus solely on finding Youthberks, you can play one of these 2, Dungeling and Schneisel. Both of them do the exact same first effect. You counterblast 1, check top 5 for a Youthberk. However, Schneisel gains 5k at the same time, whereas Dungeling does not, which is why, this is a triple rare and this is a rare, kind of, the contrast is there. But when Dungeling attacks, not once per turn, he gains 5k if your Vanguard has Youthberk in its name. Whereas Schneisel, when he attacks, if your Vanguard is placed by rating from a grade 3 this turn, he gives the Vanguard 5k. So this powers himself up more, which means he's a 15k attacker, which if you're going to play one of them, I'd say play this one, because being able to make a better number on itself is much more important than bumping up your Vanguard, because your Vanguard's already going to be 23 with Exist, 33 for Persona Ride, and on an Exist, and if it's the turn 4 and you've Persona Ride, your Exist will be 40k. So the Exist itself does not require extra power. But those are, you want to help cards to help you find more pieces, you can try any of those. And then The last like non-full blast like focus grade 2 I'm going to talk about is this guy, which is the Ghastliness Dragon, who when your Vanguard's placed during the battle phase, you can energy blast free to counter charge and give it 5k. So its counter charge is what I wanted. It's something that counter charges. However, there are negatives to him. He's a grade 2, which means that he's fighting for spaces with T-Fault and for Louivron on the board, and he costs energy, which is the worst part. Because I said going first you can't use this and the add back, so you're definitely not going to be able to use this. So the fact it costs energy is kind of awkward. And then if you're focusing on playing a variant focusing around the Full Blast who needs the 3 original Revolve forms and the Soul, you should be playing both of these, Louidwa and Fergosa. Louidwa, when discarded during your turn, the energy blast free revive it from the drop, and then it gets to search your drop or damage zone for a Revolve form to put the Soul, and then if you touch your damage zone, top card of your deck goes to damage. So it helps set up for Full Blast, and so does the Fergosa. For a Soul Blast 1, you search your deck or drop for a Revolve form and put it to Soul, and then you shuffle your deck, and if your Soul has 3 or more Revolve forms, you can Soul Blast a non-Revolve form to draw a card. So if you're playing the Full Blast variant, definitely be playing both of these. That's it for the grade 2s and like all the options you should be considering. We'll then get on to the grade 1s. So we'll talk about first the best grade 1 in the deck. And no, it's not Sir Gawain, it is the Bard of Brave Instrument, Kurino. So this card was originally released alongside Full Blast to making Full Blast so much easier on turn 3. However, this card now is the best thing to be discarding for the ride deck, and it's if you can't find like other extenders off your superior call effects, or like you can't find Sir Gawain, you just call this, because she says when discarded during your turn or called from the deck during your turn, if your Vanguard has Youth in its name, very importantly it's Youth, not Youthberk, so you can do it going on your first 2 turns of the game, you search your deck or drop for a Revolve form, and you add it to your hand, and then you put a card from your hand to the Soul. So getting your Revolve forms in the Soul is very important, because you can Soul Blast them out with many of your effects to make sure they're in the drop for the rebuild. But also, if you're out of Counter Blast and you find this off of like a search, you can call it to rearguard from that effect, and then get Revolve form from drop back to hand to then Revolve dress into from your hand. But also, very importantly, is that the deck is a private zone, so if, say, you've seen all your rebuilds, you can still check the deck and just say there's no target and then shuffle your deck up. So if you bottom deck triggers off of an effect, or like you can also see what's left in your deck and then shuffle it. So this card is very, very good. You must play 4, I think. I've tried lists that don't play it, and I think it just feels so bad. You need to play it. And then the next best grade 1 in the deck is, of course, everyone's favourite dog. It's 4 copies of Sir Gawain. This is the best grade 1 in Kedda. Well, not the best grade 1 in our deck, because we've got Kurino. But he says, when he boosts, if you've got more rear guards than your opponent, he gets 5k. Or if you play an order card this turn, he gets 5k. So if you played your order, he gets it regardless. And then, at the end of battle he boosted, you can kill him off and check top 2 and add one of them to your hand without revealing it to your opponent and bottom deck the other one. So that's why Kurino shuffling the deck is so important, because you bottom deck triggers off of, or PGs off of this, you can use them as a way, you can use this as a way to shuffle your deck. But this card's very good. It's a 13k booster, and there's no reason not to play him, and we'll play him until he's taken from us. But I think I'll maybe do a set 9 profile for this deck, and I do play it and Dissection Angel, so if you want to see that, like, let me know. And then the last like 4 of grade 1 card that we play is 4 copies of our order card, which is Departure Towards the Dawn. Now, some people won't know what this card does, and they'll think, if I'm playing Typhoon, I'm playing Wisdom, but I'm not, I'm playing this. This card is insane. For Youthberk specifically, this card says you play it with Counter Blast 1, and you check top 5 for a Revolve form, or a card with a grade less than equal to your Vanguard, and call it to rearguard. So the reason I am playing this over over Wisdom, is because yes, Wisdom is they have the same cost, and Wisdom is Pot of Greed. Drawing 2 cards is very, very good. However, you're forced to call 2 things from your hand, and if there's nothing worth calling from your hand, you have to call triggers, or you discard them, and that isn't great. But also, this is really good once you've like found your tier faults. However, this is better when this helps you find your tier fault, and I think trying to find T-Fault is so much better than this, because it means you help to get there and stabilize first, instead of trying to just like gain positive value off of hopefully drawing into a T-Fault, because there will be times where T-Fault isn't in the top 2 cards of your deck. She'll maybe be the 3rd or the 4th or the 5th, and this can help find it. But also, if you have T-Fault in hand and you play this and you check to find another one, you can get to call that one, and then you've used T-Fault twice. So I think in Youthberk you definitely play this over this. And then we'll get on to the next grade 1, which is, no surprise, it's 4 PGs. We're on Ezreus, because Ezreus is the best girl. And then we play 3 normal PGs, and of course Elementary Sanctitude gets around a guard district once, and yeah, I'm not betting. He gets to do it for no cost if they have triple drive, and unlock it in clipped by a Dragon Rider player. It's only cool when I do it to people. So that's all the grade 1s we play 4-ofs, and then there's 2 more which we play as 1-ofs, which are Yellow Julby's Topaz, and my next to most recent inclusion. This is like, I made this like a week, but like a couple days before the event I tried it out and really liked it, which is Pink Moth Girl Maple. This card came up so much, I love it so much. She says when you ride a Griffey Greater, if you Persona Road, you get to revive her from drop and give her 5k, so it means that she's a 13k booster, but also really importantly, if you can't call grade 2s from effects, she's a 13k attacker, and on a Persona Red turn, that's when she revives herself, she's a 23k attacker, which is going to ask for 15k shield from your opponent for a grade 1 who can then restand with Exist. And Topaz is very standard. It helps you build board by you return 2 cards from your from the right deck back to the right deck face up, and activate one of the following effects based on where he was placed. If he's placed on rear guard from anywhere, from an effect or from hand, you get to check top 5 and call something. Or if he's placed a Guardian Circle, he gets 15k shield, so he's a 20k shield, which means that it's like just really strong shield value. Very simple. I'm playing these. No reason not to, I don't think. I think you can, if you don't like playing the Maple, you can just play a second Topaz, but I think the Maple is really, really strong. And then we'll talk about the other grade 1 options that you can play. So we'll talk about them in this order. We'll talk about first is a Nuclear Angel. I tried so hard to fit this in the deck. I really wanted to play her for the counter charge, because there was like 1 or 2 games where I got damage denied or I ran out of counter blast and wasn't healing anymore. I was just like, I need some form of counter charge in this deck, but it's just there's no space. Like, I tried so hard, but every card in this deck is promotes your game plan of like soul blasting, or to get your evolve forms and drop, or finding your evolve forms, or compressing the deck and calling cards out. And she doesn't contribute to that, which is really unfortunate. But if you want to find space for her, like Godspeed. I wish I did find space for her. And then these 2 grade 1s I tested for a very long time in the deck, which were Wayward Therapy Angel, who is just the grade 1 version of that Exotic Dragon I showed you before. Can't be called just manually from hand and can't be rode. She's 10k base, and when she's discarded from your hand during a turn, you Soul Blast 1 and call her to a back or regular circle if you Vanguard's grade 3 or greater. So the reason you could play this over the Exalted Dragon is that if you're playing Shroud, this can be revived with Tearfault, whereas Exalted can be revived with Surgown, and I think reviving it with Surgown, you could argue is more important because it draws you cards, whereas Tearfault you're gambling. So that's something to keep in mind. And then the last grade 1 who I was originally playing at 2-off instead of these 2 was Kleegwell, who says if you have no G-Zone, which you obviously don't, you get to activate it against the following effects, which in hand, you can discard it and return 2 cards from the right deck back to the right deck. Face up to check top 7 for a grade 3, so it finds you Persona Rides and Revolve Forms, add it to your hand, and shuffle the deck. And if you didn't reveal a card, you put this back into your hand. But also, when she's put to Guardian Circle, she gains 5k shield if you have 3 or more damage, and if your opponent has a G-Zone, you can bind a grade 3 with a different name from your drop zone or soul to get 10k shield, so she'll be 20k shield, similar to the Topaz. However, she's much more in a specific situation. She needs your opponent to have a G-Zone to get 20k shield, whereas Topaz can just do it. I think Topaz is just better because he also helps you build the board alternatively. And then, we'll talk about it once more, if you're playing a Full Blast variant, you should be playing Sequana. If you're playing Original Skyfall Arms, because this is how Original Skyfall Arms gains drives. Because she says, Continuously, she gains 2k if your Vanguard has Youthberk in its name, and then when you ride by a Revoltress, you can put a soul to reset the drives of that unit to 1. So if you're not playing Rebuild and you're playing original Skyfall arms, play her, but you can't play her and Rebuild really in the same deck because Rebuild also sets your drives back to 1, and so does she, so it means you won't be gaining twin drives, you'll still be doing just one drive check. And then that's it for the grade 1s. We'll talk quickly about the triggers, which mostly is pretty straightforward. We're on 8 crit because crits win you the game. I'm specifically on vanilla triggers because they're 5k, which means that there have been games that go on so long where like on a turn where I'm like, I need to win this game now or I'm dead. I can just call triggers and they'll be 18k boost. They'll make a 13k column with something in the front row. So something to keep in mind. And then I've never really needed a soul from Blade Feather, so I don't think it's worth it. And then I'm on 3 regular heals and then 1 of Invigorate Sage, who gains 15k shield if the thing you're guarding against has restood by an effect. So this is really relevant because Babsaga has Yugmashud, Vergila has, it's Vergilas that restand your rear guards. It's good against Varga, who restands multiple times. It's good against the mirror match, which also restands a rear guard. So this comes up more than the one against a crit. Now against the crit, Bavs also gains a crit. The Obscurades against an Eva also gain crits, but this one comes up much more, and it comes up in sort of the same matchups. So I think playing one of this is better. And I wanted to play mostly the vanilla heals because having just continued 15k shield just whenever I think it's much better. And then I am on 3 draws. I'm not on fronts, I'm on draws because you're a piece reliant deck, you need to see pieces, so draws help find them. Also you hit them defensively, it feels great because you're just drawing a free card. But also being a 10k shield when your opponent's Vanguard's a grade 3 makes guarding awkward numbers so much easier. Like your opponent's swings you 15, you can just drop this. But also means that your opponent's swings at 15 to your 13k Vanguard, you can, to a 10k Vanguard, this can guard it so much easier. It means you have to drop 2 cards to show 10k shield value, you just use this. And then the OT I'm playing is Blue OT. It's a 9th crit, gets your cards back from the drop, gets you Personalized, gets you perfect guards, and I think it's the best one to play in this deck. But that is it for my Youthberk deck profile. This is, as I said, one of my favourite decks in Standard. I love it very, very dearly, and this list is the culmination of 3-4 months worth of testing. I've been testing this deck pretty much from the anime being revealed, the anime episode where he was revealed, and we sort of knew loosely what he did. I was still thinking of lists to try and what I wanted it to initially look like, and this final list is, I don't think I'd change anything. I think, as I said, if you're playing just locals, get rid of the Bleefins and play a 3rd Weaver on. But this list is near perfect. I don't think there's anything different I would do. If you want to see the alternate version that I tested for quite a while as well, and was at one point considering taking, which plays no T-Faults, no order cards, it just plays Valtrosa, it plays Exalted, and it plays Maple as your main grade 2 to help build the board. Let me know and I'll show you that. But thank you for watching. I'll give shout outs quickly. Shout outs to my entire locals who let me test. We keep testing, we keep practicing, and shout outs to my teammates from the event, James and Hesford. James helped me test a lot and he gave me a lot of ideas, and he was the one who suggested the inclusion of the grade 1 Maple, which made the cut. A very good suggestion. Shout out to Hesford, who once again helps me test and is one of the reasons I am still playing Vanguard to this day. And shout outs to the entire locals. We all went there, we all had a great time. It was a lot of fun. Shout outs to my friends Marcio, David and Martin, who all got 3rd place at the event, and I'll be doing their deck profiles on the channel at some point soon. But expect more videos from me in the future. I've got a big list of them planned, and one of them I'm doing right after this. So yeah, thanks for watching and have a nice day.